Hello everyone, welcome back to Threes to Wound. My name's Reese and today we've got a real barn burner of a fight with two elite specialist teams ready to box on. That's right, today we've got two of the specialist teams, two age-old enemies, if you will, fighting throughout the 41st millennium where there is only war. It's going to be the Legionaries versus the Phobos. If you've been following along on my channel, you know we just finished the Phobos challenge where we encourage you guys to join in as we try to give a little bit of life and spice to the Phobos Marines that were in the Moroch box. I did my guys, they were the Black Templar is what I went with in the end there, and I'm pretty happy with how they turned out. What you will see in today's battle report, though, is them in various states of undress. They weren't quite ready, but due to the timeline of when I recorded this battle report, I needed to get the game done so I could bring this out in a timely manner to coincide with the end of the Phobos challenge. Still completely missed that deadline, but that was the theory anyway, so please forgive them not being quite as sharp in the photos in the battle report. In the team selection though, you do get to see them in all their glory, so they'll be there for you to check out. There is one operative in the Legionary team as well who's not painted, so again, please forgive. It was just my opponent was really keen, and so was I to have this guy in the list so I could kill him and so they could see what he can do. So you'll see that in the list. I'm sure you can pick which one it is. This is a hugely cool battle though. I've really wanted to see these two teams compete. I've really enjoyed playing the Legionary team. I've played them quite a few times myself. I think they're great. I think they're a great example of what, with a bit of characterful rules and a bit of love, what an elite team can actually achieve on the battlefield. We're seeing great versatility with what the Chaos Marks can do and how they can change up the dynamic within the within that team. And for the Phobos, well, this is my first outing using them, so I was a little bit daunted, but I do love with a specialist team, when you've only got 6 operatives to remember what they do, there's more of a chance you get to remember all their bells and their whistles and their tricks. So I'm going to be trying to do my best to use as many of their specialist bits and pieces as I can. I can't guarantee that's what will happen in the battle, but that was definitely my intention, so we'll see how that goes. Now, I'm sure I don't need to say it, but I'm going to say it anyway. If you haven't already, make sure you head over and check out the Kill Team Casual podcast that launched a couple of weeks ago with myself, Ben from Battle Brothers Tabletop, and Russ from GFN Gaming. It's just 3 guys who love Kill Team and love the hobby, love the Warhammer world, all the games surrounding tabletop gaming, and we literally are that. We are just a couple of casual guys from 3 different time zones talking about the games we love, having a laugh. It's pretty random, I'm not going to lie. Things definitely get wildly out of control at times, but it's perfect listening for when you're painting, doing a bit of hobby, building some models. Chuck it in your ear holes and enjoy. Let it worm its way right in there, and I'm sure sooner or later you'll learn to love it. Maybe. If you haven't already, make sure you head below, like and subscribe as well. Make sure you support this channel because I'm going to keep bringing out more content for you guys. And I love hearing from you in the comments. Love hearing what you guys are liking, not liking. Love hearing, what you thought of the game, strategy changes, different ways to run these teams. That's what it's all about. So don't ever be shy. Chuck your comments below and I'll always do my best to get back to you as quick as I can. Today's mission is 1.2 Control Outpost from the Moroch mission book. The mission rules: for the STC Hab Bunker control, friendly operatives control the STC Hab Bunker if the total APL of friendly operatives on its vantage point is greater than that of the enemy operatives. The mission objective is simple. You can only score points at the end of the 2nd and 4th turning points in the following ways. If friendly operatives control the STC Hab Bunker, you score 1 VP. If friendly operatives control the Frontieris landing pad door, you score 1 VP. If friendly operatives control the Vox antenna, you score 1 VP. If friendly operatives control the Auspex shrine, you score 1 VP. If you are the attacker and friendly operatives control the Frontieris landing pad door, you score 2 VP. And if you are the defender and friendly operatives control the STC Hab Bunker, you score 2 VP. The Phobos won the roll-off and chose to go defender. I chose this because for my Phobos team, this provided the most cover for my operatives and would provide a fantastic amount of shooting locations for my marksman and veteran. My opponent was definitely going to be charging forwards, but the Legionnaires can still pack a lot of shooting into their list if they choose so. My first operative is the leader operative, and I went with the Reaver Sergeant for this one. I just think he's a really cool operative. I really love this model. Let's be honest, that's probably the main reason. But I also kind of wanted to use him as a little bit of a close combat speed bump to the charging Chaos team. So I kind of want to push him up. You maybe use the first 1 or 2 turns to get those extra CP that he can farm. But basically, I want to use him also as a little bit of misdirection. So he's got the grav shoot, so I can do some deployment shenanigans. And while he's charging up or getting up towards those Chaos lines to be that speed bump, I've also given him the smoke grenade to create a bit of cover. The Infiltrator Veteran is a model I'm really excited to use. He gets the cool custom gun. So for this game, I took P1 and Lethal 5+ on that. So he should really be able to put a bit of hurt out there to the Chaos punks. I went with the Infiltrator Voxbreaker next. I wanted to get as many of these different units in that can have different tricks and ways to make my team better. So I took the Voxbreaker basically just to see what I can get him to do and what his tricks are. I didn't think the Auspex scan was going to come into this one too much. Basically because I didn't think my opponent would be using too much cover, but Voxbreak was definitely going to come in handy, basically limiting the amount of rerolls that can be used against me, especially in close combat. That could be really handy. Next up was the Infiltrator Comms, and I think this guy's going to be one of those units that's a real linchpin on how you can get your team to maximize their benefit. Being able to distribute an extra action or that costs 1 AP to another operative out of sequence can be really, really huge, especially with, mine layers and stuff like that, or things you may need to detonate mines without a turns, shooting when an operative moves to a certain spot. That's a real game changer in terms of what you can do. I also decided to give him the crack grenade as well, just to keep him alive. He's one of those models I think will be a little bit of a target, and if he's not, that crack grenade could punish the enemy for not paying attention to him. The Marksman's the first of the Incursor models. I'm really excited about using this guy because basically he's one of the few models in my team that actually has AP on his weapon. So that's going to be really big against Chaos, especially we've got some Nurgle marks out there and stuff like that. This could be pretty hurtful. So making sure that I've got as many hard-hitting units, using him in conjunction with the crack grenade and also my veteran. These are the guys that are going to probably be the damage dealers just based on their weapons. He's also got track target, which I think is a really handy little way to watch objectives, especially in this particular setup, because there's going to be turns where you can't score and turns where you can. So being able to put him sort of on an extra special overwatch, I guess, on those scoring turns over some objectives could be huge. Lastly, it's the Incursor Mine Layer. I was definitely tossing up which of the, Mine Layer or Explosive Experts to take. I ended up going with the Mine Layer just simply because, well, his one is easier to use. And obviously being a new team, I know I've had trouble in the past using the Veteran Guardsman Demolitions guy as well. Just getting that correct and making sure that I put it in the right spot, that I activate it to its best advantage. It's not always my strong point, so I thought the plan with this guy is to get him straight up to an objective in turn 1 or turn 2 using some movement shenanigans and get him to put that proximity mine. So if the Chaos guys want to take it, it's going to hurt. I also gave him the throwing knife because, rule of cool, I just wanted someone to have a throwing knife. Also because I'm going to be pushing him up pretty aggressively, I probably want to be hiding him as well, or his ability to go back into conceal. The throwing knife's great because it's got silent. My opponent's team is all the fun and shenanigans you'd expect from a Legionary team. We kick it off with the Legionary Chosen. He's got the Mark of Nurgle and the Grizzly Trophy. I'm seeing a lot of Mark of Nurgle in this team, and that is definitely leaning into what is one of the best ways to play them. I sort of wrote it off a little bit to start with. I was using a lot of Zench and Khorne. Definitely not the way to go, it turns out. Keeping your operatives alive, who would have thought, is a great idea. He's also got the Grizzly Trophy to make him even more fearsome in close combat, so he's definitely going to be one of my early targets to take down. The Balefire Acolyte is one of my favourite models in the army, not just because of the model itself, but I love his rules. He's also given him Nurgle and taken Malign Scripture as well. The much maligned Legionary Butcher is up next. Look, I like this guy, but I definitely understand a bit of the flack he's copped about being a bit swingy. I can see that at times, but in the right situation, he can be devastating, and I'm really concerned about this guy getting into my lines. I've got to make sure I don't get too caught up in that. and make sure I play the objective. Control Alt Demon, the Legionary Anointed, is up next. He's also Mark of Khorne, another great close combat operative. Another thing to worry about, charging across the board towards me. He'll be definitely getting a little bit of fire his way. The last two operatives were interesting choices, but also the right choices in a lot of ways. Because obviously with the Legionary teams, you can really go heavy close combat, or you can also add a little bit of shooting, or even lean completely into shooting. I think they're one of the most versatile teams in terms of the way you can build them, especially with only 6 models. First up was the Legionary with the Chain Reaper cannon. This is just a cool model. I'm sorry it's not painted, but I really wanted to see it in action, so we had to get it up on the board and get it shooting and doing what it does best. It's also got the Suspensor system for mobility around the board, and also Mark and Nurgle for survivability. Last up, it was my least favourite model on the board. It was the Legionary Gunner with his faithful plasma gun in tow. God, I hate these guys. He was also given the Mark of Nurgle and the Malefic Blade in case anyone tried to get too close to him. For tac ops, I went with Seek and Destroy for my secondary, as I knew the Legionaries were going to be pushing towards me, so the best thing to do was going to be kill them, and they were going to bring those points to me. The other options were Infiltration and Recon, which just didn't really suit how I thought this game was going to play out. For me, I really wanted just to create that wall of bolt of fire, and once I'd worn those guys down, taken out some of the big heavy hitters, I'd then push forward and grab those objectives a little bit later in the game. I got Headhunter, which was perfect as I needed to put that leader down as soon as possible. He's a pretty tough operative, so he was going to be a priority target straight out of the gate. Next up was Deadly Marksman, and who would have thought it? I put it on the Marksman because, well, I need his gun to do some work if I'm going to win this game. The lack of having anything like a plasma or other high AP weapons in this team does worry me a little bit. Lastly, I took one of the Phobos tac op specifics. I took Guerrilla Tactics. This one I thought added a little bit of Phobos flavour to the way I was going to play, and it really encouraged me to be the ducking in and out of conceal, which is really something you want to be doing with the Phobos. I placed my barricades to create some obstacles to slow them down, more so than really to be using as a launch pad for myself. I know they could potentially use them as cover, but I had a lot of things on vantage points and a lot of ways to take that cover away, so I wasn't really too worried. It was just about putting some hurdles in the way. My opponent set up his to help him give him some cover as he thundered across the battlefield. For deployment, I was very lucky to have a whole lot of heavy terrain to hide behind. I'd read all the rules for Phobos, and there were some really interesting stratagems I wanted to try out at the end of the deployment phase or heading into the scouting phase. But for now, I wanted to keep it safe, and make sure that all my operatives stayed concealed and safe, and I can try those shenanigans a little bit later on. I kept my veteran and marksman at the back of the landing pad concealed, but with an engage order, and my plan was to bring that up onto the vantage point towards the end of the turn to pick off any advancing models, or even take out their gunner options if they also showed themselves. I put the mine layer on the left side of the board with plans in mind with him to lock down the objective on that side of the board. I had some sneaky movement shenanigans and had done lots of sort of measuring and rereading of rules to make sure that he could do what I had in mind. I surrounded my shooters with the Vox and Comms breaker as well to make sure I could get shots off when required. Lastly, I put my leader on the right flank, ready to charge down that side of the battlefield, or so I wanted my opponent to believe. The Legionnaires set up in a position to give themselves adequate cover before they launched themselves forward. They started by placing the Chosen and Anointed on their left flank. On the other side in cover, the Balefire Acolyte and the Butcher nuzzled in, while the firepower of the team split up, with the Plasma staying hidden, but the Chain Reaper making a big, bold decision to jump up on top of that platform, ready to get himself into a position at the start of Turning Point 1. The Legionaries were definitely wanting to get the initiative with this move. In the scouting phase, I chose Recon, and I used this to dash my mine layer forward to get him in a spot to be able to place his proximity mine where I wanted in Turning Point 1. The Legionnaires took Infiltrate, and unfortunately for me, this did mean that they gained the initiative. After this was sorted, I got to use some of my finest hoodwinks. First, I used Elite Reconnaissance for 1 CP to redeploy my leader to the left side of the battlefield. I then used the Grab Shoot to move my leader forward to give him that best chance to be what I wanted, which was the combat speed bump, but also to threaten those gunners if they didn't cover them. So this was going to give him a few options, even the Butcher on that side of the board. If I could slow him down, hold him up, keep him out of my lines, even take a lot of wounds off him, it was definitely going to be worth it. I tried to make sure I used the heavy terrain that was in front of him to hide him from the heavy gunner. I also had another Phobos trick up my sleeve to make sure he stayed safe. For turning point 1, I continued to spend all of my CP while spending 1 on Vanguard, a key part of my plan to get my guys into position, then a second on Bolter Discipline for once they got there. The Legionaries pumped up their Nurgle blessed operatives by using Favoured of the Dark Gods. This gave them mutagenic flesh. The last thing to do was for me to announce who I was going to make my Omni Scrambler target, but much to my disgust, I had misread the rule and none of my guys had line of sight on that Chain Reaper cannon. This is what we call in the business a massive up. This does not look good for my leader. So the game kicked off with me having to sit there and watch in horror as the Chain Reaper cannon moved up to the barricade and absolutely rinsed my leader. I even didn't help him out by then rolling terribly on my save, so a lot more of a comedic element to this tragedy. No CP left because I'd burned them all. This was a huge mistake and definitely not the best way to start the game. I will blame this one on my lack of experience with the team, but I don't know if I can bounce back from this one. As a wise man once said, each activation is a new chance for success. That wise man was me just then. I made that up. Let me know what you think in the comments. I think it's pretty good. My other plan did come to fruition here though, and with some sneaky move shenanigans and the wonderful world of 3 APL that the Phobos have, I was actually able to get my mine layer all the way up to the top of the Vox antenna and then still be able to plant his mine. So there you go, that's a great way to lock down an objective turn 1. Also, him remaining in conceal up there, he was actually really hard to target as well. I don't think anyone was going to get any higher than him on that vantage point. So he was going to be a real thorn in their side and a real key point scorer from me as well. With a roar to the blood god, the Butcher charged forward. But unlike most followers of Khorne, he at least remembered to stay in conceal and used some cover. The time for vengeance for my dear departed leader was here. I was still mentally doing my best to work out which order to activate my operatives and was well aware there was a plasma lurking at the back of the battlefield. I took advantage of the Vanguard move again here, sneaking my Vox Breaker up to the barricade, just ignoring all his cool abilities, and decided to use him as a Bolter Marine. He opened fire with a flurry of bolt shells and whiffed. Lucky for him, thanks to Bolter Discipline, he got to redeem himself, and second time was the charm, this time taking off 8 wounds. The Chosen was up next, and eager to get amongst his enemies, he stormed forwards, and with some canny placement was able to use the heavy terrain to stay safe. The marksman took his chance, again taking advantage of Vanguard. He snuck forward and proved his value straight away. He popped the head off the Chain Reaper cannon, starting off the tack up Deadly Marksman. Then he resighted and lined up the Anointed, taking 7 wounds off him as well. This woke the Anointed up from his slumber and he scarpered forwards into cover, trying to block some firing lines using the heavy terrain ahead. Unfortunately though, for the Anointed, the sneaky Phobos deployment had allowed a whole heap of firing lines, and this time the comms guy, again ignoring all the cool tricks that he could have done, moved forward to be a Bolter Marine and opened fire on the Anointed. The Anointed used a CP to try and save himself, and the demon inside as well, but unfortunately the Dark Gods laughed and punted him back to the Warp. The Warp continued to be fickle for the forces of chaos. The Balefire Acolyte started by buffing the plasma gun with malign influence. He then risked the wrath of the Warp by moving and casting Fireball at the marksman. The gods gave with one hand and he passed the psychic test and then swiftly backhanded him in the face as it failed to do any damage. Fickle indeed. The Phobos continued scurrying into firing positions. It was the veteran's turn, and with his flashy fancy bolt rifle ready for action, he moved and lined up the leader, who thought he was safe. The first Fusillade was only able to get a crit through after a CP save reroll. He then promptly crapped the bed on the second roll, lucky for their leader. The moment I dreaded after having to watch my leader get mowed down was here, and the plasma gunner climbed up and launched the power of a contained sun directly at my marksman. When the dust cleared, to everyone's surprise, especially my opponents, well, he survived on 1 wound. Not the start the Legionaries were hoping for. This sent me into Overwatch, and it was time to keep putting on the hurt. I picked my veteran to give him another chance with his flashy gun. Another pretty lackluster roll though saw only a crit taken off the Chosen, ending the turn. At the end of the turn, the score sits at a massive 0-all. Well, that was an interesting turn that started off in the most miserable of ways, but it actually swung back my way really heavily after that. This terrain setup mission really suits the Phobos at the early start of the game here. I needed this type of turn as well, so now it'll start to swing back the other way. The Chaos team is built for close combat, and I need to keep them out of my lines. The only way to do that? Shoot them first. Points are important in every game of Kill Team, but against an elite team, every model lost really hurts their ability to score. So I want to take them out of the game quickly in the first 2 turning points. Hopefully, if I can get the initiative here, I can keep up that pressure. Into the strategy phase for turning point 2, and the Phobos luckily get the initiative here. I quickly spend the 1 CP that I regained on Bolter Discipline again, just to make sure I can keep that weight of fire going. The Legionaries spend 1 CP on Blood for the Blood God to fire up their Khorne disciples. I also actually remembered to use Omni Scrambler here, so well done me, and targeted the Chosen to do my best to keep them stranded for as long as possible. It was my turn to get things kicked off, so I wanted to get it going on the right foot. I picked my marksman, and even though the Plasma Gunner had tried to use the heavy terrain to be obscured here, thanks to the multi-spectrum array, the marksman cared not. He lined up his shot, and even while still smoking from the plasma burns he'd received last turn, he returned the favour tenfold. Shooting the Plasma Gunner with 2 volleys, and even a CP reroll couldn't save the poor dear. Not bad for a bloke on 1 wound left. This also brought up the first VP of the game, thanks to Deadly Marksman. The Balefire Acolyte here, not to be outdone, tempted fate again, casting his mind into the warp to conjure a second Fire Blast. Foolishly, I'd placed the Veteran and the Vox Operator here within splash range of each other, and Warpfire engulfed both of them. The first hit caused 8 wounds and splashed 3 mortal wounds across, while the second hit scored 3 more wounds off and splashed another. Once the flames had died down, it revealed them both still alive, but the Voxbreaker was down to 3 wounds and the Veteran was down to 6. With a maniacal laugh, he then ran to secure the Hab Bunker for the points at the end of the turn. The Legionaries weren't done just yet. It was the Veteran now who shook off his minor warp scolding and, remembering to take the bubble wrap off his fancy new gun this time, took aim at the charging Butcher and with some unreal firepower managed to drop the brute. The Chosen, seeing this, howls in rage as the game is flipped on its head in that very moment. He cares not anymore for objectives or winning the game, he wants only blood. He runs forward, overcharging his plasma pistol to kill the so-called Veteran. In his blood haze though, he remembers he hits on 3s and not 2s like the aspiring champion, and manages to only get 1 hit through, even after a CP reroll. Now, not only has he failed to kill this lapdog of the Emperor, but he's now stranded in no man's land. The comms operative, seeing his chance to end the enemy leader and earn some points, bounds forwards and hurls his crack grenade. The explosion engulfs this champion of chaos, but as the smoke clears, he remains standing with 1 wound remaining. The Legionary Chosen spits out the last few teeth he had before grinning at the comms operative. He then raises his overcharged plasma pistol for Overwatch. I'm starting to think that maybe this guy isn't really the chosen one though, as some more terrible rolls mean only 1 crit and 1 hit land, and I managed to save the crit. To really finish off the Chosen's poor day, while he stares in disbelief at his plasma pistol that's now wronged him twice, the comms specialist puts him out of his misery and claims 2 VP for the Emperor. All this time, the Mind Layer has yet to wake up from his nap up on the Vox relay. We tallied up the points at the end of the turn, the Legionaries scoring 1 point for controlling the Hab Bunker thanks to the Acolyte, while the Phobos added another 2 VP for controlling the landing pad and Vox antenna. The scores sit at 5-1. Now that was a bloody turn, and although the model count has now swung significantly in my favour, I only have 1 operative with full wounds and 3 that are actually wounded. I've taken a lot of damage, but actually not from where I was expecting. That brutal Fire Blast and Plasma Weapon, they're the ones that have done all the work for the Legionaries, and there has yet to be any close combat. The Chaos team has also been really unlucky with a lot of my operatives clinging to life after some very lucky saving throws, and realistically a lot of poor rolling by their operatives. Bolter Discipline continues to be huge. When you combine lethal 5-up with shooting twice, bolters can really bring the pain and make up for that lack of AP. Hopefully I can just mop up here and we can all hit the showers. Into the strategy phase for turning point 3, the Legionaries luckily here grab the initiative, so get themselves back into the fight. They also spend 1 CP for mutagenic flesh, but for me, I've decided to keep my CP for any required rerolls. The Balefire Acolyte wastes no time and hurls another Fire Blast at the veteran, hoping to finish him off. But the poor rolling continues, no damage done. I'm starting to feel like the gods have really given up on this team. He then dashes down to limit the incoming fire as there are no primary VP up for grabs this turn. The Incursor Mine Layer wakes up, stretches after a beautiful nap up on the Vox antenna, and decides he should maybe get into the fight. Seeing a perfect opportunity to test his knife throwing skills, he jumps down from the Vox tower and hurls cutlery at the Acolyte, leaving him on 5 wounds. The Balefire Acolyte pulls a stray fork from his eye and fires back with his tainted bolt pistol, and even sans one eye manages an impressive tally of hits and crits, which I promptly then rolled to save. You can't make this stuff up. Awful rolling in the best way. I continue trying to finish off the forces of chaos, with the marksman managing to take advantage of multi-spectrum array once again and target the Acolyte. The CP spent on purchasing Nurgle's favour comes up big here, and he shrugs off most of the damage. Looks like the Acolyte will survive this turn as his positioning really limited the guns I could bring to bear, so I just moved my comms to claim the Auspex Shrine for next turn and shuffle my veteran around and hustled the Voxbreaker forward behind one of the barriers. With no primary VP up for grabs at the end of this turn, the scores actually stay at 5-1, as we also didn't achieve any of the tac ops. We head into the final turn and things look dire indeed for the Legionaries. They're really just hoping to hold on here for a bit of pride and take as many points away as they can. Unluckily for them, the Phobos got the initiative again. The Legionaries once again spend that CP for a bit of Nurgle's help. I spend a CP here on And They Shall Know No Fear. The Incursor Mine Layer was still trying to make up for the lost time due to his nap and was here to take care of that Acolyte. He fired point blank into him, scoring 2 hits and a crit, which with Nurgle's blessing on his roll, he was able to laugh off. Well, I mean, he's got 1 wound left, so I'm sure it hurt him to laugh, but he's still here. Deciding to go points over pain here, the Mine Layer does the courageous thing and flees from the fight, claiming the objective. The Balefire Acolyte won't stand for this and promptly chases after him. He then uses Life Siphon to take 3 wounds off the Mine Layer and give them to himself. Seeing this nigh on invincible sorcerer's reign of terror on the other side of the board becoming more and more of a problem, the veteran decides it's his job to stop this. He vaults up onto the top of the Vox antenna and shoots at the Vile Acolyte. But it appears the Chaos Gods do have a sense of humour and have returned to take bedtime away from all of us. Maybe it's all the warp power coursing through his veins or the cutlery holes, but the Acolyte whiffed big on Overwatch here after being -2 to hit due to being Overwatch and wounded. Not ideal. The 1 wound marksman, seeing the end of battle in sight, finally does what the rest of his team can't and puts the Acolyte down for good. His job done, he drops down into cover, changes to conceal, and takes a well-deserved rest. Now that all the Legionary forces are destroyed, it was just time to tally up the points. I popped my comms man into conceal to make sure I could score at least 1 point for guerrilla tactics, and scored the final point for deadly marksman, as my marksman had done the impossible and stayed alive on 1 wound for most of the game. I then also scored an additional 6 points for control of primary objectives, bringing the total score to 13 to the Phobos and 1 to the Legionaries. Let's head back to me in the studio for the wrap-up. Thanks to me down on the battlefield there. Now that was a game. I still feel like the scoreboard doesn't reflect how much of a knife's edge that game was. Like, it was right on the precipice. It could have gone either way in Turning Point 2. A couple of those wound rolls that I rolled some saves that were quite clutch. I also rolled hugely strong on a lot of my shooting. Bolter Discipline with lethal 5 up is pretty disgusting, and even against Legionaries with power armor, it can really chew through them. You get a lot of crits through, you're going to do a lot of damage, and you can really overwhelm save dice. You can really nullify their ability to roll pretty consistently. They've only got to have a few bad rolls, and that's a lot of dead operatives. When you've got 6, well, each one really, really hurts. I think both these teams are actually in a really, really cool place. I mean, I'm not thinking either of them are necessarily top tier. But for me, myself, a casual gamer, these are a great team to enter into Kill Team as well. They've got enough tricks and interesting parts that you can really learn with them and learn how to maximize it. But having that smaller amount of operatives mean that they're definitely not quite as overwhelming. For me, the MVP of my match today was my marksman, managing to get deadly marksman, scoring me the 2 VP for the tac op, taking a plasma gun to the face, surviving the rest of the battle on 1 wound, and still dropping blokes. It was ridiculous. He was really, really strong. I thought he was going to be one of my better models, and he did not disappoint. The only thing I'd probably look at changing if I did tweak my list in any way, shape or form, I'd probably look at maybe dropping the Vox Breaker. I just kind of felt some of his powers are a little bit situational. Against the right operatives, they could be hugely powerful. But geez, I really could have had a medic operative out there and really, I guess, backing me up after I made a few positioning mistakes after the fire blast, the plasma. Having that medic model out there, he still can do all the damage he needs to do, but healing guys, buffing and keeping them in the fight, getting them off wounded tokens. He's definitely going to be an auto include for me, I think, in the future. For my opponent, I don't think there was much else they could have done too differently. This setup and terrain definitely favored the Phobos, especially once I got to choose the deployment zone. Getting that side of the board really, really went a long way to helping me push the game in my favor before we'd rolled any dice. There was a lot of firing lanes, a lot of cover. The Legionary team did a great job getting as close as they did and doing the damage they did. It also shows the versatility. The plasma gun, the chain reaper cannon, the balefire acolyte. That was 3 operatives with, I guess a bit of long distance offensive threat. And they really did a lot of work. So I think, Marcus Zench, you could really flip this team into an all shooting team. Put an icon bearer in there, a couple more bolters. That's what I think is really cool about the Legionaries is they can be hugely close combat. I think they're made to be that way, but they're not limited, and I think they can be just as damaging shooting as well. Even if you're looking at making them unaligned instead of Zench, do unaligned, Bolt of Discipline for free if your leader's the same. There's some really handy little bits and pieces and tips and tricks that they can do to really power themselves up. I definitely love to run this game back on a bit more of just a match play kind of setting, maybe just more traditional setup, so there's no big clear line of sight across the whole battlefield. I think that would be a very, very different game and really push me to and use a lot more of the Phobos tricks to keep them safe. This just meant I had to keep the distance, and they were very good at that. It's also worth noting too, I rolled filthy good in this game. Like, this was one of those games where you just rolled the dice and you always got what you needed. My opponent didn't necessarily always roll bad, but at some clutch moments, the dice betrayed him. And for me, it's usually the opposite. Usually I have disgusting days on the dice. You've probably seen that in past games. So tip of the cap to my opponent there, because they played the game the way it should be played. They stayed aggressive, they put the pressure on me, and they still really nearly won an uphill battle in a lot of ways. So that's it for today's battle report. As I mentioned before it all, guys, make sure you subscribe, like. There's going to be more battle reports coming up soon. I've just finished painting up my Corsairs. I'm just about to finish the Novitiates. So getting some of those more top tier teams on the board. I'm really excited to play both these teams and see what they can do. So I might even get them matched up head to head. There's a few other teams as well that I'm working on. I finally got to get my Tau done. They've been sitting there for a long time. And there's more teams. I want to get the AdMech back out there now that they've had their buff and boost. So lots of games are coming. And hopefully I can churn them out pretty quick. As always though, thank you so much for watching. That's why I do this. I make these content so you guys get to watch these battle reports. And I hope you enjoy watching them. We'll see you next time. My name is Reese. This has been Threes to Wound.